Cavan beating Monaghan after extra time, 215 to 117. This was thrilling stuff. I think Twitter was more or less exploding as this game was going on, and particularly when Raymond Galligan hit that late free from 55 odd metres to win the game at the very end and give it the double guns and everything. What did you make of that game?
Look, I thought the way the first half was going, I was like, okay, second half, Monaghan are going to cut through and they're going to get goals. There's four goal chances, and I was counted 4.5 because I think they had 3, if not 4, fisted points.
Yeah. And
when you see a fisted point, you're always looking, is there a man on the shoulder for a palm goal here? Could he have squared it? I think there's 1 or 2 where there was another pass. And probably the fact that they'd missed those goal chances, you'd say, he took the right option. He got the scoreboard taken over. I'd still looking back, and I still can't understand how Monaghan lost. It's like change of tactics. It's almost like one of those things where the manager says, "Look, we're in a good position here. Don't carry the ball into tackles," and players almost seem to take it extremely literal that okay, I'm not even going to go forward, because I saw Brannigan and the way he played in the first half. Geez, he was cutting lanes through Cavan, and then he got a ball at the midfield and there was probably 15-20 yards in front of him, and he decided to turn and went 15-20 yards backwards, whereas that's not his game. Whereas if he was willing to break forward, possibly the speed he's moving at, 9 times out of 10 it's going to be a foul if he's tackled. And then you have Rory Beggan coming up, basically doing what Rory Gallagher or Raymond Galligan done up the far end. So like it's amazing to see a turnaround so quickly, because Cavan they kept tipping away. Like the first 15 minutes of the second half, it was nearly ready to turn it off. There was no one doing anything, and there's no pressing on kickouts, there's no driving forward, and you could have just fast forward the watch 15 minutes and start again, but just all of a sudden Cavan just got scoring after again, and then they got a stranglehold on the midfield. Monaghan were able to play the short kickouts, but they weren't willing to probably play it out of defence when the real pressure came on. But it probably shows that how important kickouts are, and how important the conditions are, and wind is going to play a massive role in how teams adapt to that in this year's championship. And then just that game management. Are we going for points? Are we going for goals? Do we need to get another score? Can we defend? Like I think it was mentioned there, if Monaghan had to get maybe 2 more points, I'd say they would have put Cavan to bed if they had to get a couple of scores early. Like if you keep possession for 2 minutes in a game and the opposition is chasing, and then all of a sudden after 2.5 minutes of keeping possession, you chip it over the bar, and then you stretch that out to 7 or an 8 point lead. That's very disheartening. Whereas, Monaghan, for all the possession they weren't really threatening, and then Cavan were able to counter-attack and get something out of it, or even to hit a couple of wides before they actually got on the scoreboard.
Do you think Banty will look back in that game and think we need to become a more ruthless team? Because this idea of taking the sensible option, that fisting it over the bar, I mean, Dublin will have somebody at the far side of the square hand pass it to them and palm it in from 2 yards out. Is that something? I presume that's something you have to work on, because they're a hard-running team. You'd imagine there are people on the shoulder.
Definitely. Like I heard Jim Gavin was on Radio 1 yesterday, and he mentioned, he was asked if he was the tag of being a ruthless manager, and he said, I don't think I'm ruthless, I think I'm relentless. And it just it was interesting to hear his take on things that, and you look back in the Monaghan game and you're thinking, okay, yeah, if they were relentless going forward and just kept that drive and that running game that they had going in the first half, like it was the running game that put Cavan open. And I'd almost say that when Cavan do come up against a team that's running strongly, their tackling is poor. They were fouling and missing tackles when Brannigan, O'Halloran, Even McManus was fouled a few times and was lucky, or should have probably got a couple of frees. Desi Ward coming from the fence, Darren Hughes. Like, there's such a powerful middle third for running. It was a crying shame not to see that. But I think they have a balance there as well, man. And I think they're building, they're going to push for Ulster in the next couple of years too. And it's just a shame that you're not seeing them in it, because I think there's a lot of high quality young lads there that they showed what they could do in the first half, and I was just hoping that they'd show it again in the second. But Cavan, credit where credit is due, Gerard McKiernan, some of the guys there, Fortune kicked some wonder scores on the outside of the boot. It's the season for the outside of the boot passes and scores.
Absolutely, and this gives Cavan a great chance of getting all the way back to the Ulster final, because Antrim are next. They will probably expect to win that, you'd imagine. Fermanagh and Down will meet them in the semi-final. But you would have probably seen Mickey Graham at close quarters in the club championship. Obviously you play with Killoa, and he was over Mullinalaghta there for 3 years. Is it any surprise that he comes into Cavan and they're doing stuff like this and getting to that Ulster final last year?
Yeah, like, look, he's one of those fellas. Like, it was no coincidence that, it's no more than a soccer game. There's no point, we're 1-0 down or whatever the score is. There's no point in throwing everyone up front with 40 minutes to go and conceding out the back. They kept their defensive shape for as long as they could, and then when they needed to keep chipping away, and you've seen it with Mullinalaghta for the last number of years. That's very much like them. Scoreboard ticking and clawed their way back. And then when it came to the crunch, they were in the hunt, and then you just had to get the right players the ball. And they won the dogfight around the middle. For those last number of kickouts, I think there was a crazy stat. Like, out of 9 Monaghan kickouts, I think they could have won 6 or 7 or something like that at the end. So, and that was probably Thomas Who was it? Thomas Riley, wasn't it?
Well, that scored which one?
That came on. He came on at half time at midfield. He caught
Thomas Callaghan, yeah, the big man, number 23.
Yeah. So he turned the game around for Cavan.